The moment I stepped outside and saw Kelly Harper's pool sparkling like it had just been filled from a magic spring, while my own pool looked like it had been sucked dry through the Mojave Desert begging for a drop of survival, I knew something was wrong. Not suspicious, not odd, but outright wrong. I, Ethan Brooks, 32, pool engineer, living in Sunnyvale Heights, California, a suburb where every inch of pool water is a personal trophy, a symbol of control and status. So when my pool, managed by an automated filtration system I designed myself, started drying up, while Kelly's, yes, Kelly, the HOA president with an ego bigger than the state of California, looked like the cover of Pool and Garden magazine, the alarm bells in my head didn't just ring, they screamed in Morse code. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. My pool isn't some ordinary thing. I poured sweat into it, from color-changing LED lights that flash like an underwater nightclub to jets that ripple the water like a gentle stream. It's where I unwind, soak after long days, and I take pride in it being mine. But this time, as I stepped into the backyard with a coffee mug in hand, I nearly dropped it when I looked down. The water was visibly low, exposing the ceramic trim I'd carefully chosen, looking like a defeated warrior in a desert, while Kelly's pool beyond the wooden fence shimmered like it had just been topped off, its crystal-clear surface reflecting the sunlight like an expensive mirror. I stood there, peering through the gap, wondering why mine was so pathetic while hers was perfect. I went back inside, dug through the water bills on the kitchen counter, and the real shock hit, nearly double the usual amount. I live alone, no kids, no hot tub, no backyard slip-and-slide pool parties. I don't have wasteful sprinklers, no underground autofill system, no buddies cannonballing in to splash water over the edge. So unless my pool suddenly grew legs and started guzzling water like a parched camel in the desert, someone was clearly stealing it. I didn't know who the culprit was right away, but Kelly Harper's name flashed in my mind like a neon sign. Kelly isn't just a neighbor, she's the asterisk neighbor, the kind who runs the HOA with the zeal of a medieval tyrant, issuing rules like she owns all of Sunnyvale Heights. She once fined me $50 for leaving a pool float out for over 20 minutes after use, calling it a community aesthetic violation. She once sent a warning letter to Tom Rivera, the retired firefighter across from me, just because his little pool overflowed onto the street during a rain. $300, no mercy, with a smug smile like she'd just won a prize. And now, with my pool drying up, and hers glistening like it was pumped from a secret source, I couldn't help but think she was involved. If someone was stealing water from my pool, and my gut was practically yelling it was Kelly Harper, I needed proof, not guesses. I set my coffee down, slipped on my old shoes, and stepped into the backyard with the resolve of a guy who'd just found his property violated. First I did the logical thing. Checked for leaks. I knelt by the pool, inspected every pipe, every pump valve, even crawled under the bushes near the fence for signs of seepage. Nothing. Not a drip escaping, not a crack in the tiles, not a trickle sound from the system I'd installed myself. My pool was tight as a bank vault, yet the water was still disappearing. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees, and went inside for my laptop. My filtration system isn't just pretty, it's smart. I'd installed a digital controller to monitor pressure, water flow, and pump schedules, all logged for me to check anytime. I opened the software, clicked into recent data, and saw everything running on schedule, pumping twice a week, 30 minutes each to keep the water clean and circulating. Nothing unusual, no flow spikes, no off-hour activations. But then I noticed the pressure sensor. It showed a steady drop, not the natural dip from evaporation, but sharp declines, like someone opened a valve and drained it out. I frowned, typed a few commands to dig deeper, and found an odd detail. The pressure plummeted in the early morning hours, when I was still sleeping like a bear in a cave. Now I started suspecting this wasn't a technical glitch. I live in Sunnyvale Heights, where a guy once tried to copyright the way he stacked pool floats in his garage to preserve aesthetics, so paranoia is practically a residency requirement. But this wasn't just paranoia, it was off, and I had data to prove it. I closed the laptop, stepped back into the yard, and looked over the wooden fence at Kelly's side. Her pool still sparkled, water clear as crystal, like it was mocking me. I remembered Kelly complaining that the community pool at Oak Ridge Park was filthy as a fish pond, and under repair, leaving the neighborhood without a public swim spot. Would she be brazen enough to siphon from my pool? The thought made me shudder, but it wasn't implausible. She'd fined me $50 for leaving a float out over 20 minutes after use, citing community aesthetic violation. She'd sent Tom Rivera a warning letter just because his little pool overflowed onto the street in the rain. $300, no leniency, with a lecture on community responsibility. And now with my water bill spiking for no reason and her pool looking freshly filled from a mystery source, I couldn't help but think she was the culprit. I went back inside, grabbed my toolbox and a small camera I'd once used to check for pipe leaks in the garage. If Kelly was really up to something, I'd catch her in the act. I stepped into the yard, picked a spot near the main pump valve, where I figured she could get access, and mounted the camera on a low branch, disguising it with some dry leaves. It wasn't high-tech spy gear, but it'd catch anyone lurking near my pool. I checked the angle on my phone, making sure it covered the whole area, then stood up and dusted my hands. I didn't know what I'd see, but I was ready to wait. Like an amateur detective with a touch of obsession, I kept checking my phone every few hours to see if my little trap caught anything. I knew I was up against Kelly Harper, HOA president with an ego bigger than her pool, and if she was really stealing my water, I needed solid evidence to fight back. 3 days passed with nothing. No figures, no noises, just a few squirrels scampering by shaking the branch. I started thinking maybe I'd been too paranoid, that the pressure drops were just a glitch I hadn't pinned down. But then the footage that changed everything showed up, and I swear, it was worth every second I'd waited. I was lounging on the couch, sipping coffee, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the camera. I opened the app, and there she was, Kelly, in all her early morning sneakiness, if you can call wearing a neon pink swimsuit sneaky. She stepped across the property line like she owned Sunnyvale Heights, holding a makeshift hose and a tool that looked like a wrench I'd left in the garage. I watched, jaw dropped, as she crouched near my pool's main pump valve, fumbling with it like an amateur thief, then hooked up the hose. She dragged it back over the fence, hiding it with some low shrubs, and I knew it instantly. She was pumping water from my pool to hers. But here's the best part. After she finished, she actually turned back, looked straight at the camera, smiled, waved, and walked off like she'd just won an award. She didn't even try to hide it. She was stealing my water to keep her fancy pool topped off, bold as if she had the right. I sat there, gripping my phone, blood boiling. Kelly wasn't just a neighbor, she was the asterisk neighbor, the kind who turned the HOA into her personal kingdom, where she was queen, and we were subjects following her absurd rules. She'd fined me $50 for leaving a float out over 20 minutes after use, calling it a community aesthetic violation. She'd fined Tom Rivera, the retired firefighter across from me, $300 because his little pool overflowed onto the street in the rain, a guy who'd saved people from fires, and she showed no mercy. She'd sent me a warning letter for using an orange float instead of a white one, consistent with neighborhood standards. And now she was pumping water from my pool to keep her lavish one sparkling, while mine dried up like the Mojave Desert. I wanted to storm over to her house right then, bang on the door and yell, "Who do you think you are, taking my water?" But then I remembered Tom. He'd confronted Kelly once for measuring his fence height without permission, and what'd he get? 3 months of random inspections, and $500 in fines for a decorative wind chime, causing noise. No, Kelly was the queen of her little kingdom, and walking into her territory with a complaint would only make her stronger. I replayed the footage, saved it to my laptop, and watched it again to make sure I wasn't imagining it. No, it was Kelly, clear as the LED lights in my pool, that smile, that wave, not just bold, but arrogant. She thought I wouldn't do anything, that I'd just shrug and let her keep going. But she didn't know I wasn't some average neighbor. I'm Ethan Brooks, a pool engineer with a creative mind and a bit of vengeance simmering. Confronting Kelly head-on might make me a target for ridiculous inspections and petty fines, like what Tom Rivera went through. But I wasn't a subject in her HOA kingdom. If she wanted water from my pool, I'd give her water, just not the kind she expected. I started hatching a plan I'd later call Operation Glowing Swamp. As an engineer, I had the advantage. I knew my pool system like the back of my hand, from the pump valves to the hidden pipes. Step 1. I rerouted an auxiliary line through a remote-controlled valve I could trigger from my phone, discreet enough that Kelly wouldn't suspect. Then, I needed something to turn her water into a memorable disaster. I rummaged in the garage, found a bucket of thin mud I'd used for pipe pressure tests, non-toxic, safe for the system, but murky enough to make a pool look like a swamp. But mud alone wasn't dramatic enough. I wanted her to remember this. I recalled some neon green glow powder I'd bought for an abandoned party project, the kind used in outdoor events, water safe, but bright as a traffic light under pool LEDs. I hauled it all into the garage, mixing like a mad chemist. The thin mud blended with the glow powder into a concoction that looked like sci-fi wastewater, murky, shimmering, and perfect for my plan. But I wanted one more punch. I grabbed some safe sulfur compound, the kind they use to scent gas, just a touch, enough to make the water smell off, not unbearable, but enough to wrinkle noses. I tested it in a small bucket, stirred it up, and grinned as it turned an eerie green, wafting a faint fish pond stench. It wasn't toxic, wouldn't harm the pipes, but it'd ruin any swim. Kelly had planned. I double-checked my pool system, ensuring the hidden valve ran smoothly and the mix wouldn't clog the pump. Though I wanted to teach Kelly a lesson, I wasn't sacrificing my handcrafted masterpiece. Everything was perfect, just missing one thing: the timing. I remembered Lily Grayson, the nosy neighbor 2 houses down, mentioning Kelly loved early morning pool parties to show off natural beauty with her HOA cronies. I swung by her place, pretending to ask about landscaping, and subtly fished out that Kelly had a small poolside gathering coming up. Just a few close HOA friends to unwind before a meeting. Operation Glowing Swamp was primed like a coiled spring, ready to snap. That morning, per Lily Grayson's intel spilled during our fake chat about fertilizer and ferns, Kelly would host her private pool party for her HOA gal pals. I woke early, brewed coffee with hands trembling from excitement, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone like a remote mission controller. The Valve app glowed on the screen, neat as a submarine dashboard. The mix of thin mud, neon green glow powder and a sulfur whiff like a warning from hell, all loaded in the pipe, awaiting my command. 6:55, Kelly's usual pump time. I tapped the trigger, took a breath, and smiled. No camera needed, no visual proof required, just sound. And the moment a piercing scream erupted from Kelly's backyard, sharp as an alarm siren, I knew I'd won round 1. And holy hell, a scream never sounded so sweet. Next came smaller shrieks, panicked, and the sound of feet scrambling on tile. I stood, strolled to the back door, coffee still in hand, and peeked over the wooden fence. Kelly was flailing by her pool like it had come alive and betrayed her. The water, siphoned from me, was now a glowing green swamp, shimmering in the morning light, thanks to the powder, with mud streaking her pristine white deck like a paint explosion from a cartoon. The sulfur scent wafted over, subtle but nose-wrinkling. Her HOA buddies, just a handful as Lily said, stood stunned, one filming on her phone, another blurting, "This is the best party I've ever been to." I fought back a grin. Kelly looked like she'd stepped out of a horror flick. Hair wild, waving the hose like she'd fight it. Her flip-flops slipping on the wet deck. Her pool was a spectacle, water murky and glowing green like a haunted bog, mud caking the tile edges, the faint stench adding drama to the air. I stood there, wondering if she realized she'd brought this disaster on herself. She'd stolen my water to keep her pool sparkling, and now it sparkled all right, just not how anyone wanted. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard heavy footsteps and panting breaths. Kelly appeared by the fence, holding a glowing green mud-stained glove, her face flushed with rage. She charged toward me, shoes squelching on the wet grass, and screamed, "What did you do?" Her voice was shrill, as if I'd just destroyed her entire world, not just her early morning party. I raised an eyebrow, took another sip of coffee, and replied calmly, "What did I do? Looks like you've got a pool problem. You should check your pump system, especially since you've been hooking it up to someone else's without permission." I emphasized someone else, letting her know I wasn't some fool to be messed with. Kelly stood there, hands trembling, eyes narrowing like she was plotting revenge. "I'm reporting this," she growled, waving the muddy glove in my face. "This is a community standards violation." I shrugged, giving a slight smile. "I'm looking forward to it." Then I turned back inside, leaving her standing there, yelling my name like a superhero villain swearing to return for vengeance. I heard her muttering something about rules and consequences, but I didn't care. I just fired the first shot in this war, and it felt great. I sat back at the kitchen table, replaying the footage from the camera I'd set near the pump, not to check it, but to savor it. Kelly thought she could keep stealing my water after that arrogant wave, that I'd just shrug and let her win. She was wrong. I wasn't here to play peasant in her HOA kingdom. I was an engineer with a creative mind, and this was just the beginning. If she thought this morning's scream was the peak of her nightmare, she had no idea. I took another sip of coffee, looked out at the backyard and told myself, Kelly wants my water, fine. Next time I'll make it even more spectacular. After perfecting Operation Glowing Swamp, I didn't have to wait long to see results. The morning Kelly held her little poolside party, the one Lily Grayson accidentally spilled about, I woke up early, brewed a coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone in hand. I opened the valve control app, double-checked, the mix of thin mud, neon green glow powder, and a hint of sulfur was ready in the auxiliary pipe. I hit the trigger at 6:55 a.m., right before Kelly usually pumped from my side. I didn't need a camera to know what was coming. I just had to listen, and holy hell it didn't disappoint. I'd barely sipped my coffee when I heard the scream, a loud piercing sound, like someone had just seen a ghost in the backyard. Then came smaller shrieks, panicked, and the sound of feet, scrambling on tile. I stood up, strolled to the back door, coffee still in hand, and peeked over the wooden fence. Kelly was flailing by her pool like it had come alive and betrayed her. The water siphoned from me was now a glowing green swamp, shimmering in the morning light, thanks to the glow powder, with mud streaking her pristine white deck, like a paint explosion from a cartoon. The sulfur scent wafted over, subtle but nose-wrinkling. Her HOA buddies, just a handful as Lily said, stood stunned, one filming on her phone, another blurting, "This is the best party I've ever been to." I took another sip of coffee, stifling a grin. Kelly looked like she'd stepped out of a horror flick, hair wild, waving the hose like she'd fight it. Her flip-flops slipping on the wet deck. Her pool was a spectacle, water murky and glowing green like a haunted bog, mud caking the tile edges, the faint stench adding drama to the air. I stood there, wondering if she realized she'd brought this disaster on herself. She'd stolen my water to keep her pool sparkling, and now it sparkled all right, just not how anyone wanted. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard heavy footsteps and panting breaths. Kelly appeared by the fence, holding a glowing green mud-stained glove, her face flushed with rage. She charged toward me, shoes squelching on the wet grass, and screamed, "What did you do?" Her voice was shrill, as if I'd just destroyed her entire world, not just her early morning party. I raised an eyebrow, took another sip of coffee, and replied calmly, "What did I do? Looks like you've got a pool problem. You should check your pump system, especially since you've been hooking it up to someone else's without permission." I emphasized someone else, letting her know I wasn't some fool to be messed with. Kelly stood there, hands trembling, eyes narrowing like she was plotting revenge. "I'm reporting this," she growled, waving the muddy glove in my face. "This is a community standards violation." I shrugged, giving a slight smile. "I'm looking forward to it." Then I turned back inside, leaving her standing there, yelling my name like a superhero villain swearing to return for vengeance. I heard her muttering something about rules and consequences, but I didn't care. I'd just fired the first shot in this war, and it felt thrilling. The morning Kelly's pool turned into a glowing swamp. I thought that'd be enough. Thought she'd wise up, shake the mud off her designer flip-flops, and back off from a line she shouldn't have crossed. But I'd misjudged her completely. Kelly wasn't just the HOA queen with an ego bigger than Sunnyvale Heights. She was the living definition of stubbornness wrapped in a floral dress and a fake smile. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee and re-watching the prank footage like it was a trailer for Water Thief, when an email notification popped up. Subject: formal complaint, vandalism and water contamination. I clicked it, and sure enough, there was Kelly, with prose dramatic enough for an international tribunal. She accused me of deliberately sabotaging neighboring property and poisoning the community water supply as if my pool were a public fountain I'd hijacked. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Kelly clearly wasn't backing down after this morning's scream. She wanted to paint me as the villain to the whole neighborhood, but I wasn't worried. I had the camera footage, crystal clear proof of her sneaking around hooking a hose to my pool, complete with that arrogant wave like it was her victory lap. I saved it all to my laptop, double-checked it, and prepped for the HOA meeting she demanded. If Kelly wanted to play this game, I'd show her I wasn't the type to be bullied. I'm Ethan Brooks, pool engineer, and I've got data, logic, and a dash of humor to take her on. The meeting happened at the Oak Ridge Park Community House, a small room with a wooden table and the smell of stale coffee. I walked in, coffee mug and laptop in hand, and saw Kelly at the head of the table, face red, hands still faintly green from the morning's mud. The other HOA members, about 5, including Tom Rivera, sat around, looking like they were trying not to doze off before it started. Kelly stood the second she saw me, pointing and launching into her speech. "Ethan Brooks deliberately sabotaged my pool, endangering community health and violating every standard of Sunnyvale Heights." Her voice was shrill, like I'd released alligators into her pool instead of mud and glow powder. I shrugged, set my coffee down, and opened my laptop. "If I may," I started, voice calm like I was explaining a pump valve to a client. I plugged into the projector, an ancient thing the HOA rarely used, and played the camera footage. The screen lit up with Kelly in her neon pink swimsuit, sneaking around attaching a hose to my pump valve, then waving at the camera like a silent film star. The room went quiet, except for a low whistle from Tom. He leaned over, whispering, "Well, damn Kelly," with a smirk I knew he'd been holding back for ages. Kelly didn't deny it. She was too smart to fight evidence in her face. Instead, she switched tactics fast as lightning. "It was temporary," she yelled, hands flailing like she was conducting an orchestra. "I got Ethan's permission at a community potluck to use water while the Oak Ridge pool was under repair. An emergency measure for the common good." I raised an eyebrow, sipped my coffee. "Which potluck?" I asked, voice even. You mean the one you banned me from because I brought an orange float instead of a white one consistent with neighborhood standards? The room went dead silent. Tom let out a raspy laugh that cut through the tension. Kelly's face turned redder, lips pursed tight, but she had no comeback. I glanced around, saw a few others hiding smiles behind their hands. They knew I was right. Kelly had emailed the whole neighborhood about float color rules and barred me from the potluck for disrupting harmony. She had no leg to stand on, and I saw it in her eyes. Fury, but powerless. The board couldn't find Kelly, not yet. They needed something called proof of malicious intent, and apparently glowing mud and sulfur stench, while enough to ruin a pool party, didn't quite get her hauled before the HOA gallows. But I wasn't there to see her punished. I just wanted to send a message. I'm not the neighbor she can lead around by the nose. I closed my laptop, stood up, and as I left the room I glanced at Kelly. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. I heard her mutter something about consequences, but I walked out, certain I'd just won a major round. I caught her counterattack. A few days later, as usual, I stepped into the backyard with a hot coffee in hand. But this time, something odd caught my eye. The main pump valve, which I'd locked tight after the first prank, looked different. The lock was gone. In its place was a new crude cheap connector, clumsily hidden under some pebbles. I knelt down, brushed the pebbles aside, and saw a thin hose snaking through the fence, running straight to Kelly's yard. She'd come back, more sophisticated this time, like she thought I'd let my guard down. I stood up, smirking. If Kelly thought she could play pool ninja without getting caught, she really didn't know who I was. I'm not just some guy with a nice pool. I'm Ethan Brooks, pool engineer with a system smarter than her dumb HOA rules. I'd installed pressure sensors and cameras from the last round, and they weren't just for show. They were my snitch network, more reliable than Sunnyvale Heights gossip mill. I went inside, opened my laptop, and checked the data. Pressure drop at 6:52 a.m. But right when Kelly usually pumped from my side. I rewound the camera footage, and there she was, sneaking around like before, but more careful this time. No wave, no smile, just hooking up the hose and darting back through the fence. I sat there, sipping coffee, and laughed out loud. Kelly wasn't just stubborn, she was hilariously absurd. But if she wanted to keep this up, I'd escalate the game. I wasn't letting her pump clean water from my pool again. This time, I'd make it more memorable than the glowing green swamp. I headed to the garage, rummaged through my supplies, and started upgrading Operation Glowing Swamp. The thin mud from before was a good start, but now I needed something thicker. I found a bucket of denser mud, still system safe, but thick enough to clog any swim. Kelly planned. I ditched the green glow powder for blazing orange, the kind used for hazard signs, glaring under pool at ease. And for extra drama, I swapped sulfur for biofish fertilizer, non-toxic, pipe-safe, but reeking like a dead fish beach in midsummer. I hauled it all to my garage workbench, mixing like a mad scientist. The new brew looked like horror movie runoff, bright orange, gloopy, and stinking so bad I had to crack a window. I tested it in a small bucket, stirred it up, and saw perfection. Thick enough to spray like a geyser, sticky enough to cling to whatever it hit. I double-checked the hidden valve, added a flow sensor to pinpoint when Kelly pumped, and got Ryan Kim, the tech-obsessed kid a few houses down, to program the control app to auto-trigger the mix on a pressure drop. Ryan showed up, eyes lighting up at my plan, and said, "You're turning your pool into a weapon." I laughed. "You ain't seen nothing yet." The system was upgraded to perfection. Thick mud, orange glow powder, and fishy stench from biofertilizer. A mix to turn any party into an ecological disaster. I knew I was ready for the biggest counterstrike yet. Kelly still wouldn't back off. Instead, she dug her hole deeper by announcing a unity pool party via a neighborhood-wide HOA email. I read the subject line in the kitchen, coffee in hand, nearly laughing out loud. "Join us to enjoy community unity by the pool. Bring a light beverage and a spirit of harmony." All sugary like the pool was communal, not mine. No mention of ownership, no line about permission. But I saw her game. Kelly would use my system's water to show off to her HOA cronies and some VIPs Lily Grayson had mentioned. Folks who could help her save face, maybe even tighten her grip on the board after the green swamp accident. She thought I'd stand still again. Too bad this time I was more prepared than ever. I didn't need to do much. The system was automated, thanks to Ryan Kim, the tech kid who'd programmed the valve to spray the mix when Kelly pumped. I just had to wait, and this time I wanted to see it live. I faked a morning jogs pie, dressed in workout gear, sunglasses on, and looped around the back road behind Kelly's place for a clear view through her fence. At 9 a.m. sharp, the party kicked off. Kelly stood in her yard, rocking a fancy white swimsuit, cocktail in hand, bragging to the crowd, about 20 people, from HOA members to a few strangers who looked like rich newcomers. Her pool sparkled, water crystal clear, and I knew she'd just pumped it from mine via the new hose. I stood there, hands in pockets, waiting for the signal. Then it hit, a faint hiss from my system, and instantly, Kelly's pool erupted. Thick orange mud shot up like a geyser from the main jet, arcing perfectly through the air, splattering her white swimsuit and the guests. The blazing orange powder glowed under the sunlight, turning the water into a hazard swamp, while the fishy stench from the biofertilizer spread, thick and unmistakable. The reaction was epic. One lady screamed, clutching her chest like she'd been attacked. A guy in khaki shorts dropped his wine glass, coughing. A kid started crying. Kelly froze, mouth agape, watching her pool turn into a horror scene in under 60 seconds. I covered my mouth to keep from laughing out loud, but the scene was even better than I'd imagined. Kelly rushed to the pump valve, trying to shut it off, but the pressure had built up. She turned it the wrong way, and a blast of orange mud sprayed back into her face, coating her from head to toe. She stumbled, slipping on the wet deck, screaming into the void like a character in a slapstick comedy. The guests scattered, some tripping over lawn chairs, leaving orange muddy footprints on Kelly's pristine white stone path. But the highlight came when her pool maintenance guy, a tall dude I'd seen around the neighborhood, showed up. He took one look at the scene. Orange mud, fish stench, and Kelly soaked and shrieking like a maniac. He shook his head, yelling loud enough for the whole block to hear, "Nope, I'm not touching that haunted pool," then turned his truck around and peeled out, leaving Kelly standing there, drenched, furious, and increasingly unhinged. I stood behind the fence, chuckling behind my sunglasses, feeling like I'd just directed a perfect play. Kelly thought she could keep stealing my water after the green swamp fiasco, that her new hose setup would let her win. She was wrong. I'd turned my pool into a weapon, and now she was paying, not just with embarrassment, but with chaos in front of her powerful friends. I headed home, heart still racing with excitement, and checked my phone. Ryan texted, "Sensor triggered a spray 10 minutes ago. Did you see it?" I replied, "Saw it, and it was more beautiful than I imagined." Every drop spilling from my pool wasn't just liquid. It was a statement that I was no longer the pushover neighbor, that Kelly Harper might be the HOA queen, but on this battlefield, I controlled the water literally and figuratively. I honestly thought Kelly would wise up, take a step back, but she was stubborn as reinforced concrete, and brazen as if my pool were national property she'd claimed rights to. That morning I woke up still in pajamas, coffee in hand, planning to enjoy a few peaceful minutes, but my phone buzzed. A pressure sensor alert. A sharp drop at 2 a.m. My brow furrowed. I opened the camera app, rewound the footage, and nearly dropped my mug. She wasn't just sneaky. She was reckless, picking the dead of night to avoid detection. But this time she'd overdone it. I replayed the clip, watching her fumble to attach a hose to my pump valve, then drag it back to her yard. But Kelly's no engineer. She was clumsy, and while pulling the hose she accidentally loosened a wire near her backyard control panel. I didn't need to guess. Hours later, as I ate breakfast, a small pop sounded from Kelly's side, followed by spraying water and that familiar scream. I stepped outside, peered over the fence, and the sight was worth it. Orange mud from my system backfired through her hose, flooding her yard, splattering her glass doors and shorting out her electrical panel. The yard lights flickered and died, leaving Kelly standing there soaked in a glowing orange mud sea. I stood behind the fence, coffee in hand, and smirked. Kelly had shot herself in the foot. My system didn't even need my touch. She'd triggered the leftover mix herself. Her yard was now a glowing swamp, her fancy SUV caked in mud, and the fishy stench wafted like a warning to the neighborhood. But I knew she wouldn't stop there. She was too proud to accept defeat. Sure enough, she called an emergency HOA meeting, emailing with the subject, "Severe vandalism requiring immediate action." I got it while washing my mug, and I knew this was her final swing. The meeting was at the Oak Ridge Park Community House, but this time only Tom Rivera and I showed up. The rest were probably sick of Kelly's drama. She stormed in, clutching a threatening letter scrawled in marker, looking like it was written in a rage. "Ethan Brooks destroyed my property," she yelled, waving the letter in our faces. "Here's proof." I raised an eyebrow, glanced at Tom, and he just shrugged with a smirk. I opened my laptop, played the latest camera footage. Kelly crawling under the fence at midnight, hooking up the hose, and accidentally shorting her own yard's power. "Looks like you did it to yourself, Kelly," I said, voice even. "Stealing water from my pool isn't such a bright idea." Kelly stood there, face red, speechless. Tom seized the moment, standing up and saying, "By the way, I checked the HOA books. You embezzled $5,000 from the community fund to fix that pool you wrecked yourself. The room went silent, and I saw Kelly's eyes widen. For the first time, she looked like she wanted to bolt. Tom pressed on. I motioned to vote Kelly out as president. Who's in? Just me and him. But 2 votes were enough in an emergency quorum. Kelly was ousted on the spot, and I heard her mutter something about lawyers as she stormed out. Days later, a for sale sign popped up in her yard faster than her hose sprayed mud, and soon after I saw moving trucks roll out of Sunnyvale Heights. Kelly left in disgrace, leaving a power vacuum in the HOA, and a story the neighborhood would talk about for years. I stood in my backyard, sipping coffee, looking at my pool, now restored, water clear, LEDs twinkling like nothing ever happened, and smiled. I'd won, not just by defending my pool, but by teaching Kelly a lesson she'd never forget. Kelly's house didn't stay empty long. A young couple, Sam and Mia, moved in with a cheap inflatable pool they plopped right in the middle of the yard. The kind you buy at a big box store for $20. A joke compared to my masterpiece. I peered over the fence, saw Sam hand pumping it while Mia giggled, and I couldn't help but laugh too. They weren't the type to compete with pools or lawns. They just wanted to live happily, and that eased my mind. Sunnyvale Heights had enough drama from Kelly, and their arrival felt like a fresh breeze. No sneaky hoses or dumb warning letters. The HOA couldn't leave the president's seat vacant forever. Tom Rivera, the retired firefighter who'd been my ally against Kelly, stepped up to take the role. He wasn't power hungry. He just wanted things simple and fair. At his first meeting as president, he passed a new rule. No trespassing on private pools without consent. $500 fine per violation. I sat in the back, sipping coffee, and nodded in approval. Tom glanced at me, smirking. Consider it for you, Ethan. I shrugged, replying, I just want to keep my water. The room burst into laughter, and for the first time, Sunnyvale Heights felt like a real neighborhood, not a war zone. I spent time restoring my pool after all that chaos. I cleaned the system, swapped mud and glow powder for clear water, and added new touches. UV lights to enhance the nighttime glow, and a little gnome statue holding a bucket by the jets, a funny reminder of my victory. The pool was more beautiful than ever, and I loved sitting by it at night, dipping my feet in the cool water, listening to the gentle waves from the jets. It wasn't just a pool, it was a symbol of the peace I'd reclaimed from Kelly. The whole neighborhood seemed to feel the shift too. To welcome Tom as president, and bid Kelly goodbye, folks threw a potluck at Oak Ridge Park. No pools, no drama. Just food and laughter. I brought a tray of grilled meat, and no surprise, won best dish, by a landslide. Lily Grayson patted my shoulder, saying, You're not just good with pools, you can grill too. I laughed, sipped my beer, and looked around. Tom telling firefighting stories, Sam and Mia goofing off with their little inflatable pool, Ryan Kim showing off a new app he'd coded for yard lights. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged here. But my favorite moment came when I got home from the potluck. A small package sat at my door, no sender's name. I opened it, found a tiny plastic flamingo painted glowing orange, with a note, Brilliant, until next time, HOA survivor. I laughed out loud, setting it by the gnome at my pool. I didn't know who sent it, maybe Tom, maybe Lily, or even Ryan, but it felt like a victory medal, a reminder that I didn't just survive Kelly, I beat her at her own game. That night I sat by the pool, coffee in hand, quietly watching the UV lights dance on the still water. No more odd pump noises, no sneaky hoses threading through the fence, and best of all, no Kelly Harper. She'd left Sunnyvale Heights, taking her bloated ego and HOA rules written in arrogance with her. This pool was truly mine now. Every drop, every ripple, uncontested. Sunnyvale was peaceful again, and Ethan Brooks, the weirdo with underground valves and pressure sensors, had restored that order. I glanced at the glowing orange flamingo bobbing in the pool, chuckling to myself. If anyone was dumb enough to try again, my garage still had buckets of mud and enough glow powder for the whole block. But tonight, no strategies, no backup valves or sensors, just sitting here, savoring my win, as quiet as the pool's surface, calm and absolutely mine. The story HOA Kelly kept borrowing my pool, so I filled it with mud and glow powder, reflects a very real aspect of life in the US today. The tension in suburban neighborhoods where homeowners associations HOAs often become battlegrounds for power, ego and petty disputes. In the story, Ethan, a pool engineer, faces off against Kelly, an arrogant HOA president who secretly steals water from his pool to maintain her perfect image. This mirrors how in America, many get caught up in keeping up appearances in their communities, from flawlessly manicured lawns to lavish parties, sometimes at the expense of personal boundaries or ethics. Kelly represents those who abuse the small power of an HOA, a common phenomenon, when absurd rules like fining Ethan for an orange float spark unnecessary conflict. The lesson from the story isn't just about revenge, but about protecting personal space and handling injustice smartly. Ethan doesn't opt for direct confrontation, which could lead to lawsuits or prolonged tension, common in law-obsessed American society, but uses his technical know-how to turn his pool into a weapon with orange mud and glow powder, letting Kelly bring about her own downfall. This shows a practical takeaway. In the US, where rules and neighbor dynamics are complex, creativity and patience, like Ethan setting up cameras and waiting for proof, can outdo head-on fights. Plus, support from Tom and Ryan highlights the value of community. Building allies like Tom, who replaces Kelly as president, restores fairness. So the advice is: protect your rights cleverly, gather evidence persistently, and leverage collective strength over letting personal ego drive you, especially in an American culture where community harmony and rules intertwine tightly. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more hilarious tales about dealing with neighbors like Kelly. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video when I tell you about the other time my pool became a revenge weapon.